We're going to start in about 2 minutes. Okay, I think we can start. And the sikha we're going to be learning is in Sichas Chelik Yutes. The first sikha of the parsha is Vaeschanan. It's connected to the pasuk in this week's parsha, since this week's parsha has parsha of Krishma, the first parsha of Krishma, where it says, "Vaeschanan levanecha," you shall teach your children Torah. And from there we learn out the mitzvah of learning Torah. So the sikha is going to be discussing this mitzvah of learning Torah. So we'll start inside. In the mitzvah from Talmud Torah, in this mitzvah that the Torah has to be learned, we find generally 2 commandments, 2 tzivuyim. Number 1, lilmay, to learn. The chiyuv, and the Rebbe says in parentheses, kishiyakir, to learn the Torah. The obligation that every Yid has to learn Torah. In parentheses, the Rebbe says that the Rambam says, when does this obligation start on the person? So usually by every other mitzvah, the obligation starts when you become bar mitzvah. But learning Torah, the obligation starts even before. The Rambam says kishiyake means when the child starts recognizing what the unit of Torah is. It means like this, be'erzem, as we will see, the mitzvah is on the father to teach his son. Even though the son is a kotten, as a child, you have to teach him. The Rambam says, what happens if, for some reason, the father didn't teach him, or even the father has to show him, then he's supposed to learn himself. And the Rambam doesn't say kishiyagdil when you'll grow up and become a godel, which is bar mitzvah. He says kishiyaki, which is a chiddush of the Rambam in this mitzvah, that it starts from when you kishiyaki, that from when you start recognizing. But the bottom line is, what's negated to this union is that the mitzvah is a yid has to learn Torah. And the second is lelamed, or sometimes the lashon is lelamdo, to teach it. So it's not only to learn Torah, there's a second thing, you have to teach Torah. So learn the Torah mitandere, there's an obligation to teach Torah to others. Ubifrat, especially if a father to learn them is ein. The father has to learn with his sons. That's more included because the pasuk says, "Vishinantam levanecha," teach your sons. And Rashi Taka says it doesn't mean only sons. You have to teach talmidim b'chlal, but specifically you have to teach your son or your sons. So one mitzvah is that you have to learn Torah yourself, and the second mitzvah is in that another detail in that mitzvah is that you have to teach Torah, especially to your son. If we find something strange here. Side the Rambam or side the Alter Rebbe, even on Hilchas Talmud Torah. Side the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe when they start giving the halachas of learning Torah, nicht mit dem Dinam and is mechuyit to learn Torah. It doesn't start at, that's what you would imagine. You would start, the first thing is there's a mitzvah, every Yid has to learn Torah. It doesn't start with that. Nor, mit dem Dinas is a chiyuv, mitzvah says even a Torah, if an af to learn a Torah mit mea kotten. Starts over the din that there's an obligation, and it's not stam an obligation, it's a mitzvah from the Torah, that the father has to learn Torah with his son, who is a kotten, who is still under bar mitzvah. So he starts with the mitzvah of the father teaching the son. Because l'chura is nicht verstandig, not understood. So alle Menschen haben gedacht, stehen der Chiyuv von Limud HaTorah b'chlal. First, they should have said b'chlal that there's a mitzvah to learn Torah. Hainu latzmei means that every Yid himself has to learn Torah. And only after that, the Rambam should have added, the Rambam, the Alter Rebbe, as is nicht genug der Lilme, nor es darf ich sein, l'lamdo l'acherim zu bnei HaKotten. And after you know that there's a mitzvah to learn Torah, then it should go on. The next step is not only learn yourself, teach it also to others, which in this case means teach your son, the kotten. So you should have started with the mitzvah of learning Torah yourself. Wie pashta seinian, just like in Pashtinia, the chiyuv l'ilmud of bnei HaKotten is do, by less is do the chiyuv l'ilmud Torah. Why is there a chiyuv, an obligation to teach your child? It all starts off, there is a mitzvah to learn Torah, and the mitzvah continues not only yourself to teach others. And this is and this is an extra chiyuv in mitzvah Talmud Torah, more than other chiyuvim, other mitzvahs, Was bazei is chinuch haktanim nomer darabanan. All we know there is a chiyuv on a father to be mechanech his children to do all the mitzvahs. And the child is shayches lechinuch. You have to teach him to ben chesed. You have to teach him to eat matzah, etc., etc. All that is midarabanan. Midaraisa, child has no obligation, and even the father has no obligation to teach his child to do the mitzvahs. Midaraisa, but the rabbanan made a chiyuv of chinuch. But mitzvahs Talmud Torah, there is an extra din midaraisa that you have to teach your child a cotton. You have to teach him Torah. So that's an addition. So the Seder should have been, first there's a mitzvah to learn Torah, and then there's something else that you have to, another chiyuv, an extra chiyuv, which is different than by all other mitzvahs, a chiyuv of the father to teach his son Torah. Or bifrat, as es ken nit sein der lelamdo on the friedrich lulmit. But you can't teach Torah if you don't learn first. And you have to learn, not stamazeh. These, as different Torah, eine chadudi b'ficha, the Gemara says that when you learn Torah, it has to be very sharp in your mouth. In other words, it should be learned in such a way that you really know it. When they ask you something, you shouldn't hesitate to answer. You should answer on the spot. You should answer sharply. So that takes time. So the first thing is you got to learn Torah. That's Bagashmi is Pashma. First you learn Torah yourself, then you could teach. So why does it start with the mitzvah of teaching to others, teaching to the child? The Pashas came in this Masberzaya, I see Tulip Tzvei time. The Rebbe said the Pashas, you could explain it for two reasons. Number one, the Baal Sido Achiv min Tzesem in HaTorah to learn Torah mit HaKotten. The Rebbe is learning from the other side. Since, as we said, there's a mitzvah midiraisa to learn Torah with a cotton, with the child with a cotton. Nitvi by alle mitzvahs was in zei is men Torah nit mechuyev to mechanech sein ktanim. Not like I said before, in the other mitzvahs, all other mitzvahs midiraisa, there is no obligation to teach children how to do it. Besides Torah, there's a special obligation to teach a child who's still a cotton to teach him Torah. Kum tu is it comes out that the limud Torah by jeden einen muss sich anfangen und fängt sich an und min Torah wenn noch a cotton. So according to that, if you look at a person, when does a person start learning Torah? Since there's an obligation on the father to teach the Torah midaraisa to his son a cotton, so if you look at the person, when does a person start learning? When he's a cotton. Und der Rebbe hebt sich an Hilchas Talmud Torah mit den Dinim wegen Limud Torah von Ayiden, wenn sie heben sich an bei Jeden, bekat Nussay. That's why he starts Hilchas Talmud Torah, which is telling you that you have to teach Torah to a cotton, because the pale, so it comes out, when does a person start his obligation of learning Torah? From when he's a cotton. So therefore, it's one of the reasons possible to say that's why the Alter Rebbe, the Rambam, they start the Hilchas Talmud Torah with the din of teaching a cotton rather than learning yourself, because every person starts learning Torah when he's a cotton. That's one reason. Another possible reason, the Tziviyat Talmud Torah is nichpol pomim rabbis. It's a lotion in the Rambam, Sefer HaMitzvahs, that this mitzvah that you have to learn Torah is mentioned many times in the Torah. Side that tzivui lilmud and side that tzivui the lamda. Side the obligation that you have to learn yourself and side the obligation you have to teach others is mentioned in the Torah many times. The Rambam says, "But the tzivui ikri, the main commandment, der was wird gerechnet in Minyan HaMitzvahs from Rambam. The posik that the Rambam counts in his Seder, the Minyan HaMitzvah that he counts of the psuk. He tells us the psukim from where we know the mitzvahs is Vaeschanan levanecha. The posik Vaeschanan levanecha of this week's parsha, which says teach your children, that's the mokir where the Rambam brings that you have to learn Torah yourself. Because he says that this posik was his kailo with the Rambam zog dort lil metero lelamdo. In Vaeschanan levanecha it says teach your child Torah. That includes you should learn yourself and you should teach the children. We bald that the mokir ikri from chiv from limud Torah eich from lilmud is from Vaeschanan levanecha, and since the source in the Torah, where do we know that we have to learn Torah? Is from the posik that says teach the Torah to your child. What's meant the pashtas b'nei hakotten? The pashtas, even though it includes talmidim also, but it means more children. And pashtas, it means a child that's a cotton. So the posik, which is the source of the mitzvah of a person having to learn Torah, is from a posik where it says you have to teach Torah. The Rebbe hebt sich an Hilchas Talmud Torah mit nechiyev alav to learn the Torah mit b'nei hakotten. Therefore, it starts Hilchas Talmud Torah starts with the obligation of a father to teach his child, because that's the posik where we learn out the mitzvah of learning Torah. And this answers the question of two answers to this question, so to speak. Why does it start first with teaching the child rather than learning yourself? One is because it comes out that when does a person start learning Torah? When he's a cotton. So we start with a cotton. And the second thing is the posik, which is the source of the din that you have to learn Torah, is from the posik which talks about teaching your child. The Meilah, so Hilchas Talmud Torah starts with the mitzvah of teaching your child. So l'chura, that's a good answer. Because Guf is over there. This itself needs an explanation. Favos taki is mitzvahs Talmud Torah us geteilt von alle mitzvahs. Why taki? This is basically we answered it by stating a fact, but it doesn't give a hasbara, it doesn't give an explanation. What is taka the reason? We see taka that has to do starting with a child. But why taka is this different than all the mitzvahs that meet with this senior? Number one, as limud atayra tashaychas min atayra ichzakotin. Number one, what's the reason taka? That learning Torah is specifically connected to a cotton. No other mitzvah is connected to a cotton. All that midarai said the cotton is not mechoyed in any other mitzvahs, and you're not mechoyed to teach you midarai. Midarabbanan. But learning Torah is midarai said that you have to teach a cotton. So why taka is Torah different than the other mitzvahs? And go further. The second thing, the to learn Torah is nichlal and the mitzvah b'shnantam v'nechal. The second thing, why taka is the mitzvah of a person himself to learn Torah included in the pasuk where it talks about teaching your child Torah. Why is it written that way? So the Rebbe says we have to find another answer. Why it's connected to a cotton. And we learn it from the mitzvah of learning Torah with a cotton. You could answer b'deichik, could be a deichik, but it's an interesting answer. At the time, they are bringing them chilik for limud Torah beil mazel gabadel limud losad lovi. Torah is telling us that we have to learn Torah. Torah wants to hint that there's a difference the way we learn Torah now and the way it's going to be learned in the future. And Mashiach comes. Which means, moving the posher, that's very obvious, as when Eden yipnuyim b'Torah v'chachmos, when Mashiach will come, and the Rambam says the Lashon, the Eden will be free, we won't have any troubles, we won't have any worries, so we'll have plenty of time to learn Torah and the Chacham of Torah. When Yi Yisrael Chachamim Delam, the Rambam says every Yid will be a great Chacham. When Mala Oretz Deya, the whole world will be full of knowledge. When Tarba Deya v'Chachma b'Emes, the Deya, the Chachma, the Emes, which means the knowledge of Torah, the truth of Torah, will be plenty in the world. So that time when we will learn Torah in such a way that Zayin der Limud Avonas HaTorah b'Meile Shalei Be'erech Tzitzter. The way we're going to understand Torah, learn Torah, will be much deeper, much greater than the way we learn Torah now. B'Loshen Chazal, as the Chazal say, and the Rebbe quotes the Loshen of the Chazal, which I remember if I bring you once, the Rebbe, when he quoted this Loshen, he said, if the Chazal wouldn't use that term, he would never be able to use this term. What did the Chazal say? The Torah was melened itzter, that the Torah we learn now is hevel legabe the Torah was melened loselavi b'Mashiach. Is like stupidity compared to the Torah we will be learning in the future by Mashiach. The Chazal say it, so they say it, we could use that term. But what it means is that the Torah we're going to learn then is shaloi be'erech, not at all compared to the way we understand Torah now. Now, in that case, the Meili is the closest limit HaTorah bisman hazeh, afilu fun gedolim. So generally, when we learn Torah now, even not a cotton, even a gadol, an adult learns Torah, the best way is nit mer v'al limit from a cotton. It's almost like a child learning. Avada, it's not like a child learning now, but compared to the real way we're going to learn like a child. And therefore, the Torah wants to hint to this senior that our learning Torah is like the limit of a child by writing it connected to a child and the starting Hilchos Talmud Torah with the mitzvah of teaching a child, because to show us that be'etzem, even when we learn Torah, it's really like a child. Another thing, when the child learns Torah, what is it? He doesn't really know it well. It's all a preparation. It's an education, but preparing him for when he becomes an adult. Was great in which prepares him to the real chiyuv that he'll be able to fulfill when he becomes a gadol. So we could compare our learning Torah now compared to a child. First, he compared it to a child. Pashut, the knowledge, the level of knowledge compared to Losad Love is like a child. But now he has another word. Same idea, but from another angle. That just like when a child learns Torah, it's only a preparation for the future when he grows up and he could really learn. So too is our learning Torah, no matter how we learn, in this world now, is only as that each take and learning is achinuch v'achonet to limit Torah losid loving. It's only a preparation to the way we're going to learn Torah later. Dafke nordem v'sizdot Talmud b'yodeh, because only when we have the learning now, because the Gemara says that in this world we learn, and when you come to Gan Eden, they ask you, did you come with Talmud b'yodeh? You have your learning with you. So he uses this lotion that if we have our learning now, which is the limud Torah in Elam Hazeh in this world, so by doing that, we'll be able to, we'll be vessels, we'll be able to receive the Torah and understand the Torah from Mashiach's time. So our Torah is like only like a chinuch, like a cotton's learning, l'gabe being an adult. So our learning b'chlal is like a cotton. So that's the connection to a cotton that you could say. But the beer is not, the Rebbe says it's not completely understood. This explanation is not completely satisfactory. This prat is not only by Torah. We're looking for something special by Torah. By other mitzvahs, it has nothing to do with a cotton. Limud Torah has to do with a cotton, which is, we said before, that's why it starts with that. But why is it taka cotton? This idea that we just said now, what we do now, legabe la'osid love, is like a cotton. That we find by other mitzvahs also. The state, the roof the lotion, it says in Medrash Sifri, it says the lotion, adi mitzvahs was mir ein mekayim ve'lam hazeh, by all the mitzvahs that we do in this world now, seine tziyunim to the mitzvahs that mit mekayim ve'lam losid love. It's only like signs, simonim, for the mitzvahs, the same mitzvahs that we will do it when Mashiach will come. Al demot vet zayin zeir kiyum ke mitzvahs etzenecha. We say, in davening we say, that Mashiach will come and will do the mitzvahs as you really want. That means Mashiach will come. Then we will fulfill the mitzvahs in a much higher level. So by every mitzvah is like that. So if we're saying the reason why by Torah we say it's connected to a cotton, because to show that our now learning is like a cotton compared to later, every mitzvah like that. You could have done this by every mitzvah. Every mitzvah that we do now is like a preparation only for Losid Lovet. Das heißt, as eich kima mitzvahs ve'el mazeh, and also doing mitzvahs in this world is nor bepchines katnes. It's only like some mind, like a miner does it. Siyunim, it's only like simonim legabe kima mitzvahs losid love legabe the way we'll do the mitzvahs in the future. Now, das is my time beguf achinach v'achonet v'shleimus kima mitzvahs. Both inyanim that we said before. We said before one inyan that our learning Torah now compared to later is like from a cotton, only lower level. Also, it's only like a preparation for later. The same thing by all the mitzvahs. Number one, it's all, the way we do it now is like a katnus. It's like a level of being katnus, legabelosid love. And also, the second thing also, it's only a preparation to later. So if that would be the reason, it wouldn't be dafke by limud Torah. Aber von dem the mitzvahs Talmud Torah dafke da shaykh sich zakoten. But since we see that dafke the mitzvah learning Torah has this connection to our cotton, und noch mehr, that zivi kloli of Talmud Torah wird nicht leil und angesagt durch Vaeschanan levenecha. And the second thing, that the general mitzvah of learning Torah is given to us through the mitzvah of teaching. It's all from the pasuk Vaeschanan levenecha that you teach your children. That's where we have the mitzvah of learning. So we see there is this concept is something special by Torah. He's moving. We understand as in Talmud Torah is something by learning. In this union of cotton and katnas, all this that we're saying is something special by Talmud Torah. By other mitzvahs, you don't find it. That's why the mitzvahs don't have anything to do with being with a cotton. While Talmud Torah must have something special along these lines, that dafke there we have it, and that's why by Talmud Torah we have the union of the cotton. What is it? So we'll understand it by first explaining what is the difference. We all know what the difference in Torah and mitzvahs is, but what is behind, what do we see when we do mitzvahs or we learn Torah? How is it accomplished? What is done when we do these two things? Mitzvahs, was werden getan mit Wörtern Gashfrim. Mitzvahs, which we take a physical thing, a pair of film, a wool for tzitzes, and we do a mitzvah, is ikir in yonam zu ufton in the dvorim. The main thing that happens is you accomplish something with the thing. In Welt, everything Gashmi is a part of this world. There's something that we want to accomplish in the object. Like you put on film, the film becomes holy. You bring a bitter in the film, you put on any mitzvah, you take a matzah, you do a bitter, you do a mavarer, you elevate the Gashmi. Like Dinyan, sometimes we have a lotion, when we talk about the person versus the object, it's the Gavra and the Chefze. The Gavra is the person, the Chefze is the object. So there is a lotion, Gavre tutufinum Chefze. Avada, who does the mitzvah? The Gavre. The person does the mitzvah. If the person doesn't do the mitzvah, then the mitzvah itself is nothing. The pair of film that's laying on the table means nothing. But what's the purpose? The Eibishter wants that we should take a dover Gashmi. So the person does it, and we transform the Gashmi into something special. So Mavader Mazachas einem dover Gashmi, to purify and elevate the Gashmistic thing. When you talk about the Gashmi, it's not only Gashmis outside of you, even the person himself, the attributes of his Nefesh Habamis, which is the low part of the person, the Nefesh Habamis. That's the simple thing that happens when we do a mitzvah. When mit welchem is mekayim the mitzvah, you bring a zichuch, a bitter elevation in the object that you're using to fulfill the mitzvah. Und der Ribe. So if you look at it that way, afapi, as mitzvahs daar from mekayim with people, you know that we do mitzvah, you also have to be vital. You have to do it Nicht weil Azay is Mechayev Seichel, not because your Seichel tells you to do it. No, but Azay is the Rotzen Ha'elyon, because that's what the Eibishter wants. And where do we see it? In the Brocha. Every mitzvah make a brocha. What do we say? Asher kedeshonu b'mitzvah v'tzivonu. We do the mitzvah only because the Eibishter told us to do it. And deswegen is the Iker Sachen kiyum mitzvahs the asiyah. The main thing is the doing, the act, the physical act. That's the main thing of the mitzvah. You take a physical thing and you do the mitzvah. Even though you have the bittul, but the main thing is the mitzvah. Der bittul, ubechlolos, koloshe chazal dosos mitzvah zayin metzari v'sabriyas, the bittul that you have when you do mitzvah. And included in this is also, the chazal say that one of the purpose of the mitzvah, of doing the mitzvah, letzari v'mesabriyas, is to purify the person, to make the person edeler. So it's again something that does to the person. That was the mitzvah that Farusha from dem Gavre in mentioned. This that the person has to feel bittul. The mitzvah has to make a person feel bittul to the Eibishter, has to elevate the person. Is nit make b'di'evet. The di'evet, if you didn't do that, you didn't have that feeling, the mitzvah is still done. It doesn't hold back the mitzvah from being a mitzvah. Therefore, it's like a secondary thing. There is the physical act. That's what you have to do. Then there's another nakuda there, a side thing that makes the person edeler, elevates the person, and brings the person to bittul. But the main thing is having to do with the gashmi. Limud ha-Torah is in your but learning Torah is not that. When you learn Torah, the idea is that you should understand. You have nothing to add to. Not the pshat that you have to make the Torah. You have to bring kedusha into the Torah. You have to take the Torah, which is the Eibishter's chokhmah, and you have to understand it. That means the whole purpose is my mind should have Torah in it. Nicht wollen ausführen, wie es will sich versuchen der Memes von der Askola. What you have when you learn Torah, what you have not, it should come out. I'm looking for what I want. I would like this to be like that, so I learn Torah to bring to that. I have to learn Torah to understand what the Torah says. So the Torah is the Torah on its own, and it's the kavan of learning is that my seichel should accept it. And even though it doesn't fit to what I would like, doesn't matter. I have to Torah is to understand what it is. Now the truth is, this is not only by Torah. Rabbi doesn't say it, but that's the hemshech. Any chokhmah, the person can have to learn science, and he would like it to be a certain way. That's not what he's doing. You have to learn to understand what is the fact. What does the science say? We say math. You learn math. I would like 1 and 1 should equal 4. Too bad. 1 and 1, the seichel is that it equals 2, and I have to understand it my seichel. So it's of every chokhmah. The difference is when we talk about Torah, was by Torah das masig sein chokhmos is, but it's not only the idea of learning Torah is that you understand. Your brain understands the Torah. Your brain has the Eibishter in it, because the Torah is the Eibishter's chokhmah. And the far is that inyan habitl and inyan ikri, bifrat in limud Torah. Comes to learning Torah, bitl is part of it. You have to develop its ikr. By mitzvahs, we said the ikr is the ma'isa mitzvah. You have to have bitl. Also true. Torah, the whole inyan of Torah is the bitl. Why? The Baal as chachmos is baruch is in ganzen hecher forgether and nivroim. Since the Eibishter's chokhmah is completely higher than anything that has to do with the creation. Can das nicht nikla werden by a nivre, nor when the land Torah mit bitl. So a nivre, which is be'ein arech, completely has no, far apart from the Eibishter. You can't grasp the true ein arech of the Torah. If you're bottled, you, so to speak, undress yourself from your mitzias, so then you're taking the Torah the way the Eibishter gave it. So by Torah, bitl is part of the learning. Since the whole idea of Torah, learning Torah, is that my mind should understand what the Torah says, not what I want. And therefore, you need the bitl even more. When the land, nor mit keich ha-seichel, if you learn Torah and just using your seichel, kann es interferieren zu sein, am-megale ponem b'teirish shleki halacha. It's a losh in Gemara that in Chazal say that it's possible for a person to learn Torah and to come out, use the Torah against what the Torah wants. That's called megale ponem b'teirish. You reveal a certain pshat, a certain face of the Torah, shleki halacha, against halacha. Erotake chochma, you could be a person that understands chochma, as zogt gutes Wortes, you can have all kinds of good ideas. Obviously, it's nicht halacha von Torah, chachmos is, but it's not Torah. It's doing what you want. The only way you really learn Torah is you have the proper beat. Und the far zogen Chazal, as es muss sein borche b'Torah tchila. That's what the Chazal say, that before you learn Torah, you must make the brocha. And what does the brocha mean? Every mitzvah you make a brocha. But here, the Meforshim say, Rebbe says in order 45, it's Gemara in the Dorim, And the Bach explains it, and the Rechaim explains it at length. It means like this: before you learn Torah, as an introduction to learning Torah, you must make the bracha. What does that mean? The bracha is Hashem chose us, gave us His Torah. When you realize that this is His Torah, das ruft is beim Leib and bittel zum nächsten Torah. That brings out that if you make this bracha before you know what you're saying, it brings out in the person you recognize not only the Torah, the Chacham, the Torah, the nächsten Torah, the Eibush forgave the Torah. Was durch dem wird akela haruya to Torah Hashem. If you have that bittel before you start learning, then you become a kela, a proper kela to have Torah Hashem. So here's one thing that we see Torah over mitzvahs in one way, that by mitzvahs you also have to be bittel, but that bittel is not what the mitzvah is. If you didn't have the bittel, the mitzvah is there. By Torah, if you didn't have the bittel before, it's not even learning Torah. If you don't have the bittel, you could come up with the wrong ideas. You're big chacham, but you come up with wrong ideas. You have to have the bittel. So if you didn't learn Torah. So bittel before you learn Torah is an important thing. Then he adds another nakuda here. It's not only before you learn. You have to have bittel also while during your learning. Just like you have to have bittel as the foundation and the introduction to learning Torah. But durch dem wird nakela to Torah Hashem, which makes you into a vessel to be able to receive the Torah, the real Torah, which is Torah Hashem. Same way, while you're learning, you have to have the feeling of bittul, more than when you do mitzvahs. By the way, by mitzvahs, you said also you have to have bittul, but you have to have more bittul by learning Torah while you're learning. So first we said you have to have the bittul before, make the bracha before, and then he says while you're learning. Why? More than by mitzvahs. By kima mitzvahs, when the mensch is kind to the body. By mitzvahs, if you do the mitzvah properly, and if you do it with bittul, because that's what Hashem says. So you're doing it with proper bittul to Hashem. Kinal as well before. Is in sein ton the mitzvah nicht reingehen mich an eigene Metzias. So when he does the mitzvah, his Metzias is not there. If you do it properly, you're doing it as the Eibush said. You're the physical person who's doing it, but it's not your Metzias. Why are you doing it? Because of me. I'm doing it because of the Eibush. A statement chatchil in the tnuah for folgende Meibishten Sonntag. You are in the tnuah. You're in the way of doing it just because Hashem said. The Mele, since automatically when you do a mitzvah, you put on film. Why would a person put on film? You put on film because the Eibush said. So while you're putting on film, there's no other reason. There's not you. I want to put on film. Gotta be nuts to take a box in the morning and put on a box on your hand and your head. It's all because the Eibush wants. So chatchila in them licked that you're doing it because the Eibush wants. So you don't have to mention so much that you have to have bittul while you're doing it, because the bittul is there automatically. If you had the bittul before you did the mitzvah, you knew you had the bittul, and then you do the mitzvah, automatically there's the bittul. Well, why would you think you don't have? Why would you think that you're doing the mitzvah not for the bittul? If you're doing it because the Eibush wanted, automatically you're doing it because the Eibush wanted. Torah, learn Torah. Bal Vinyan is the yichud from seichel adam with the muskel chachmasi yisborach. Torah is different. The whole idea of Torah is that there's a yichud, a unity between the person's seichel with the muskel, with the idea that you're learning, which is the Eibish's chachma. Because haste, it means like this. If you learn and you attack it, learning Torah properly, and you are mechavim to the Torah wants, he says, imagine. Person learns Torah and he has to come to a conclusion to this decision. And he comes to a decision, Posha, using his seichel. That's how you learn. You think about it, you bring a right from here, you bring a right from there, you're learning Torah, and you come to a real decision. A decision of what the Torah wants. Which means that your seichel worked out to figure out the Eibish's chochmah. So how did you figure out the Eibish's chochmah? My seichel. So here it's possible to start thinking so. My seichel is involved. Darf man wollen, also in dem sollen sich nicht reinmischen Pnies und Shechet von seinem eigenen Seichel und Metzias. Here it's very possible that you feel your Metzias. It's not so much bittul. By a mitzvah, if you're doing a mitzvah and you start off doing it because the Eibush said so, that's how you're going to continue. The Eibush said so. Torah, while you're learning and you figure it out, and you say, oh, so it's my Seichel. So if the moment in my Seichel is involved, you got to be very careful. Not always will you learn the proper way. You could have Shechet. It's like a bribery. If you're seichel, if you really have an atiyah, somehow you want to do it differently, you might start your seichel working differently, because after all, what is it that you're doing? You're doing with my seichel. My seichel is the one that's supposed to figure it out. That layman atayre can amol atosom, the guy who learns could make a mistake sometimes. A person, when he learns and is fine, could come to a mistake and think, I reached such a level that all I care about is to come to the truth of what David wants. Imagine if a person thinks that he's at that level, that my seichel is reached already such a high madrege that I figured out I am the one that could figure out what David wants. Und der Fahr, so therefore, when niemand sagt anders wie sein Seichel zu machen. So if somebody else says different, I say, no, what will I think? Nehmt on, as Jan sagt, if I'm the smartest, so to speak, my Seichel can figure out, and so I know what David wants. Someone else says differently. Oh, so that guy doesn't know what he's talking about. He's going against the Torah. The Gemara says sometimes a person can get angry at somebody else. So the Gemara says, because of your Torah. What do you mean getting because of your Torah? Because since I'm the guy who understands Torah, so I'm the guy who understands the Eibishter's Torah. So no one, when anybody says different, is wrong. But it's not true like this. Why? Because Beis has in the Emerson is there vials that there goes as im artak upon him eich dos was misok tepech on seichel. Could be it's not true. The reason he's upset because the guy's saying different than me. It's my seichel. I'm the one. So you're saying up. You know what you're talking about. So it's possible that the person Metziah should be stuck in here while he's learning Torah, even if he started off with the Beetle. He started over the Beetle and he started learning, he came to a conclusion, figured it out. While he's learning, he could start thinking, and who knows what his mind could say. And if anybody says different, in truth could be it's because of his yeshes, because of his ego. He went against me. At least could be a little bit of it. The Rebbe says, Kalponim eich. Und der Rebbe darf eich der Limud HaTorah Gufa sein durch den Beetle. Therefore, while you're learning, it has to be absorbed with the Bittul to the Eibishter, zu verhitten, die eigene Metzias wie Yeshe soll sich nicht reinmischen, to make sure, to protect you, that your own Yeshes, your own ego, should not get mixed in, meshachet sein, mate sein, Yegias HaSeichel, should bribe and turn your Seichel, the way your Seichel thinks, in der Verstehen, egal sein Chachmos is Baruch. It might be your Metzias might get mixed in the way to understand the Eibishter's Chachma. So therefore, you have to have the second thing. So you have to have two things. First of all, you have to have bittul before. By every mitzvah, you should have bittul before. But by every mitzvah, the bittul before is only a secondary thing. The ikar is the mitzvah. I tell you, it's not. It has to be. Otherwise, you'll never grasp the Eibishter's Torah. Because if you're not bottled, you're a mitzias gashmi, a nivra. You can't get the Eibishter's Torah. But in addition to that, a mitzvah, while you're doing it, you have the bittul automatically. You started off right. And Torah lav nafka, you could start off right, and nevertheless, b'shas you're learning. You could get stuck, with your own yeshes, because what's touch learning? Learning means my seichel. I have to understand. And therefore, you might get your yeshes and might come to Megalopon, who knows what you could do, and you think that somebody else is wrong. So you have to have the bittul now too. Yeshleimer, ados is der beer and the tzvei inyonim anal. Sifal, this could be the explanation in the two things we said before. Which two things? Number one, what the inyan for limud HaTorah is dom in HaTorah by a cotton. Why? The mitzvah of learning Torah midaraisa is even by a child. And the second thing, what the tzivah for limud HaTorah from Agodol is nichlal and tzivah for Vaeschanan to Panecha. The second thing is that why is the mitzvah of learning Torah, even for an adult, hinted or learned in the midst of teaching a cotton? That's the question we asked. So the Rebbe says, now we'll understand why. In these 2 points, this expresses the two things we said before, that there has to be bittul before you start learning and has to be bittul while you're learning. And that's hinted in these two things. And the Rebbe explains it like this. Dos was limud HaTorah, hebt sich on, then means noch HaKotten. This is that learning, the mitzvah of learning Torah starts from a child. We ask the question why. And the truth is, with the rice it starts, kashayakir, we said before, when the child starts understanding. With the Rabbanon, you have to teach him Torah before he understands anything. Even before the age of being a cotton. Then the Rosh Hashanah a cotton that already starts understanding, like we said before, kashayakir starts understanding a little bit. No, but the Rabbanon, gleich mishiyadei ledaber. Says a child, atinik mishiyadei ledaber, could start talking, which is like a year and a half, 2 years old. Melamdei, Torah tzivulon meisha berosher. So we see that the shaychas of learning Torah so much to a cotton. that point is madgish. That stresses adi aschole v'yisod for limud atayr is neither seichel shebetayr. That's the first thing. First thing we said we have to know before we start the foundation and the introduction to learning Torah means part of the learning is to have the bittul. What's a bittul? Like a cotton. So that's why by Torah, the beginning, early on, you have to start learning. That's the beginning of his life. He has to start learning already because that's the union of learning Torah. That before you even get to anything of chokhmah, you also have to have already the bittul. No, der mami to maktinatzme. You have to make yourself a nivis. You have to be bottled to the Mishnah. Make yourself low. Der bittul to neis na Torah shel mayim matan v'das. This shows the fact that you teach Torah to a cotton even when he's just 2 years old shows that this has nothing to do with seichel. This is something higher than seichel. This is something comes as introduction before. But that in that bittul is not abhängig from gadlus v'seichel. This bittul that we're talking about, that you have to have an approach to learning, a mindset before you learn, have to have the bittul, has nothing to do with gadlus v'seichel. It's nothing to do that you're a gadol already, but maybe you could understand. But there is faran by yeden. This is by every yid. Afilo by atinik mishidei ladaber. Child that could just start talking. It's ad nishmosei because of his neshama. So this is the first inyan. The first inyan why a cotton is mechuyev on learning is because the first inyan, a cotton represents bittul, and it's the bittul that starts from when you're young. That means the beginning. So here also the beginning. Und der zweite Prat, the second thing, das was evet sivi of limud atayr von agodel, but nichlalim sivi b'shnantim l'vanecha. The second thing, that even the mitzvah of an adult learning is part of the mitzvah of a child learning. We said, why is it that it's learned from the mitzvah of teaching your child? Then that teaches us as be'ez dem limud gufer, them is them areingetom in keich ha-seichel, to teach you that even while you're learning and you're using your seichel and you're a gadol and you're already using your seichel. See, before you start, you're like a cotton because you're not involved yet. Before you started using your seichel, that's the first thing. Now we're saying the second thing: when you're already a gadol, which means you have seichel and you're learning seichel, and you're using your keich ha-seichel with the limud from a gadol, like a gadol learns with avone v'asogir, with understanding. That's like the bittul be like a cotton. You have to be bottled like a cotton. So the mitzvah of a Talmud Torah by a gadol is part of the mitzvah of Talmud Torah from a cotton. To show you that when you're learning, you have to have that bittul. So here we have the answer to 2 questions, and that's why we have it's compared to a cotton in both of these ways. Now the Rebbe says Vishen Geret, Merer Amol, I spoke many times, as Gevald Yeder Inyan of Befraten Torah is Vaeschanan Protis B'Diuk, since everything, especially Torah, is Vaeschanan Protis and is exact, is verstanden. From that we understand, as es ist da Teichen die Gescheiche zwischen der Parsha Shavua and the Perek Novus as Mizokte Melent in the Matreffen of Shabbos. That since there are certain Shabbosim that we learn Pirkei Avos, so there must be some connection in the Parsha that we learn to the Perek Pirkei Avos. And that goes to the Shabbos zwischen Pesach and Shavuos, concerning the those Shabbosim between Pesach and Shavuos. Now, derech zeh, and the Zumadiki Shabbosim Echlal, and also in the summer weeks, summer Shabbosim, late Minig, according to the Minig, to Zog Pirkei Avos called Shabbos Sakais, that we say Pirkei Avos the whole year, I mean the whole summer. And now it's Minig Chabad also, so it's like that for us. So even though we're not now between Pesach and Rosh Hashanah, the whole summer, but the Peil Mamesh, we still learn Pirkei Avos, so there must be a connection between this, the Inyan in this Parsha, to a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. Now, which Perek are we talking about? So this is interesting. This time when this was printed, the Rebbe said the Siche, it's Shabbos was Tisha B'Av, like this year. Ubinyanenu comes by us. Und wie bald es ist ein Dobe Poskim, Simen Zok Pirkei Avos dem Shabbos Tisha B'Av. There's an argument in the Poskim whether you say Pirkei Avos Shabbos or Tisha B'Av. So no matter which way is the halacha, they're both true. That varies on like ein day, either day as mezok yo Pirkei Avos. The Rebbe says I'm going to explain the connection to Pirkei Avos. According to the day that on this Shabbos you don't say Pirkei Avos, then there's no connection. But there is a day that you do say Pirkei Avos. I'm going to connect it, the parsha, to Pirkei Avos according to that opinion. Or Bifrat, it says even more. Vibaldas. Since we really, really desire and we're hoping that Mashiach will come every day, and these days like Tisha B'Av will be changed to Yomim Tevim, is bismichas mamish for Shabbos Tisha B'Av. It does kelul. So till you get to mamish to Shabbos Tisha B'Av, this includes a chakim et achukik deilas l'chol days of Mezogim Tamas Pirkei Avos. We're waiting that everybody would agree to say Pirkei Avos. The only one that, the reason there's a day we don't say because it's Tisha B'Av, and Tisha B'Av you can't learn, so you don't learn. But if Mashiach would come, then for sure we'll learn Pirkei Avos and Tisha B'Av on Shabbos. So in May lessons, I hope every year will come. So now the Rebbe says we could talk about Pirkei Avos connected according to the day, because we're hoping it'll be Chol HaDeyos. Okay. So we have to find a connection between the Parsha and the Pirkei Avos. So first of all, the Rebbe says, Neisiv and the close the Kishayches, zwischen Parsha Vaeschanan and the Perik Revi von Avos, besides the general connection between Parshas Vaeschanan and the fourth Perik of Pirkei Avos, was mizokt al pianal Eidam Yor in Shabbos Parshas Vaeschanan, according to what we said before, according to the day that we say it on Shabbos Tisha B'Av. On Shabbos Parshas Vaeschanan, which that year we still say it. So there has a connection, because in Klolos the Parsha with the Pirkei Avos, where do we see the Klolos Dike connection? Was in beide gefunden Maribin Yonim wegen Talmud Torah. In both, in the Parsha Vaeschanan and in the Pirkei Avos Perik Revi, we find a lot of inyonim has to do with learning Torah. At Sol from the Tzivoyim of Talmud Torah stehen in Parsha Vaeschanan. Some of the places where we find a mitzvah, the tzivoy of learning Torah, we find in Parsha Vaeschanan. And the Chama v'Kama Mishnayos from them Perik and Halt Meiros b'Shaychas Limud Torah, and many Mishnayos in Perik Revi are talking about Limud Torah. So that's a general connection. But besides that, you find Penech in zwei Mishnayos from the Perik Ayirov at Gosham Yechedes v'Negedet zwei Nyonim Bitul Hanal. Rebbe is going to explain how in two of the Mishnayos in this Perik we find a lesson, and it stresses the special union of Torah the way we explained before. The two inyonim of bittul, the bittul before and the bittul during learning, was fought in Talmud Torah that has to be by learning. And that we find, the way the Rebbe will explain it, in two Mishnayos in this Perik. This Perik, which is parallel to the two inyonim of bittul that we find in Parshas Vaeschanan, where it talks about Vaeshanantum levanecha, that you have to teach Torah to your children, and that's where we know Talmud Torah, like we said before, etc., etc. Mishnah Chof. Perik Daled, 20th Mishnah. It says like this: if you learn Torah when you're a child, when you start learning Torah when you're a child, what is it like? Like ink being written on new paper. In other words, there was nothing written there that you erased. That ink gets absorbed and stays. So the same thing, if you learn Torah when you're young, it'll be absorbed and it'll stay with you. If you learn Torah when you're old, what is it like? If you write with ink on a piece of paper that had something written and you erased it, and that will not last. The whole Mishnah is not clear. The first part we understand what he's trying to tell us. If you learn Torah when you're young, it'll last. Why is he telling it to us? It pushes a yid. Tell him, yeah, you better learn Torah when you're young. And don't put it away till you get old. So he starts off saying, if you learn young, it'll stay. Why does the Mishnah have to tell us the second half? Stress the second half. What's the second half? When you learn Torah when you're old, what is it like? It's like when you write on a erased piece of paper and it won't last. What's the purpose of telling us that? Is then the Mishnah is the Mishnah trying to tell us if someone didn't learn Torah for whatever reason till he got old, you should give up and assume that you're not going to succeed. Why is it telling us? The first part says you should know if you learn young, it's very important. That's it. So everyone knows you should learn when you're young. You tell us no, when you learn old, then it's no good. So you shouldn't learn when you're old. What's the purpose here? The beer in them, the explanation is Alpia now is their Pirush and Alem Material. The Rebbe is going to teach a different teach. When it says learn Torah young and learn Torah old, we said before, learn Torah as a cotton means with bittul. That's what it means. If you learn Torah when you're young, also means, besides the simple pshat, also means as I learn Torah with bittul. You learn Torah with bittul. And as you make yourself smaller and you mevatel yourself like a child. But das gives them a from vet Torah niklabin. Only if you do that, Torah will absorb in you and stay in you. Like if you write something on new paper. But when the limud Torah is normal, it's ein chokhmah v'seichel. If you learn Torah without bittul, only with chokhmah, that's the taich. If you learn Torah zoken. Now zoken, Poshet Pshat means old. But Gemara says also zoken zeh shekona chokhmah. Zoken is the one that has chokhmah. That means he's saying that if you learn Torah only with chokhmah, on bittul, without bittul, Ken Torah Hashem by in nikkel ben kedaboi. You will not absorb the Torah. will not penetrate so much in you. So he's not telling you don't learn when you're old. He's telling you, learn Torah with bittul. And he's saying, if you learn Torah with bittul, it'll stay. If you learn without bittul, it won't stay. But he's not telling you don't. If you learn later, you won't work. So that fits to the first thing that we said before. It when you learn Torah, it has to have a hakdome of bittul. Then there's another Mishnah, Mishnah Yutes. Shmuel Hakot Neimer. Shmuel Hakot says, this is what he says. Bin feile vecho, I think it says, al tisma. When your enemy falls, don't be happy. If he stumbles, your heart should not be happy. Can yira Hashem, Hashem might see what you're doing. The Rabbeinu, and Hashem's eyes will be bad. The Heshiv Molov Most say that unfortunately means that he might take away the anger that he had on him, but put the anger on you. So don't be happy when an enemy falls. That's the lesson that Shmuel HaKotan says. Is Bavuz the Shaila here? There's an obvious, famous question. What did he say? By saying, if your enemy falls, etc., etc., don't be happy. Because this, is a posik in Mishnah. This whole word is mamash posik. So Pirkei Avos is not chazarim psukim. So what's he trying to tell you? Obviously, he means something other than what the posik means. He's using the same lashon, but he means something more different. He's masbid the Machzor. So the Machzor explains. The Machzor was a Talmud of Rashi. It explains like this. The posik is talking about your war, a fight. You have an enemy in gashmistic things, in world things, in business and things like that. Shmuel HaKotan is machadish. Shmuel HaKotan is machadish like this. That's Ebrahim Mochamte Shel Torah. Zwischen zwei Talmidei Chachamim. Like even when there's a war of Torah, there's a dispute in Torah. Two Talmidei Chachamim and Israel to them, Zebed Bar Halacha, and arguing over Halacha. But Nein Adam Tzveitim and Natseiach, and one over the other became victorious. Darb them and Natseiach wissen. So the one that wins has to know as bin Feil Levech Al Tismach. Don't be happy that your enemy lost, meeting Nitzochen and Tzveitim that you won over him. And they say that's what he means. Al derech fidish of Nechunyim and Akone, like the Gemara said, of Nechunyim and Akone, when he would enter the yeshiva to learn, this is what he would say. He'd say at Tefillah Yerotzen, and he would say, I shouldn't come to this point that some of my friends might make a mistake and I'll be happy. Because if I fight them, that shouldn't happen. It's bad. And that's what Shmuel HaKotan meant. That's the Poshet Pshat that the Machzor explains. He's talking about two arguing in Torah. Was is anders Mochamte Shel Torah? Why is the dispute of the war, the fight in Torah different? Was da wird man gekent meinen, as es megia sein Simchas bin Tefillah Vecha. That here we might have thought, he said like this, in Posek it says, when other things. And Shmuel HaKotan adds, same thing in Torah. He's mashmeh that even if we would learn the Posek and know that in other things you shouldn't be happy if you win over your enemy, I would still think in Torah you could be happy. Comes Shmuel HaKotan and says, no, even Torah you don't. Why would I think that that's different? When the Vater Shmuel HaKotan warnen gegen them, Shmuel HaKotan has to warn us, don't do these matter. Why would we? I self-understood, it's the same thing. Guys, you're fighting with somebody, you're arguing with somebody, so it says, and even if you win, don't be happy. But the Rinyan is the pshat is like this. The case where you won over somebody else comes to halacha. He says, if he made a mistake in halacha and I was right, so who won? I won. Not my winning. I won. The Torah won. Now we verified the truth of what the Torah says. You should be happy. Baruch Hashem. We didn't know. There was a question what the pshat is or what the halacha is. And finally, I won. It means I proved that this is right. This is what the Torah wants. I should be very happy. So Shmuel HaKotan says, when your enemy falls, even by Torah, don't be happy. Why? A person should make a cheshbon like this. If all you cared about is that the truth of Torah came out, you'll be happy. Happy what? Not that your enemy fell, that you won, nor blaze the positive thing, as is from Torah. That should be happy. That's what he says. If you shouldn't feel that you won over him. Don't be happy that I won. That's wrong. Because that's yesh, it's not Torah. You should be happy that the Torah came out, that now we know the true halacha. But he says, but if you're thinking that if my enemy failed, that's wrong. No chayinyan. Something else to it. Then er will gehalten by the Emes der Zugetrogenkeit zum Megalas and Chachmasi is better. Tell the person like this. If you speak true, Taki, that you care really about the Chochma of the Eibishter, so by ihm Bechlal nicht gewinnt gehechlet, so onnen as is a nachfall from the Fehler Wecha. So Bechlal, it wouldn't be that you feel that you won over him. If you feel that, why? We're not talking about stupid things. We're talking about two people that each opinion is true. The halacha is like one. The halacha lemaisa can't design gebei deis. You can't actually lemaisa do both opinions. By the pale, can man sich finden, nor wie ein Deir. The pale, you could only behave like one opinion. Aber beide Deis, ein who is gehalten, sagt Divrei Elokim Chaim. But since it says both opinions are the words of Hashem, so you didn't even win. See, if it would be a question of who's right, they're both right. So if you really care about the Torah, you wouldn't even feel that I won over my enemy. You didn't win. We bald as I feel noch im Psak halacha. Bleib die zweite der in von Torah. Since Lapi Emes, afterwards, even if the Psak comes one way, the other opinion still stays true. It's part of Torah. Is if they're day and mitchaychet zu sagen bin feil und nicht mit Tevecha. So you can't say the other opinion lost, and he's not your enemy because he's saying also the truth. So if you really would care only about the Torah, so he says, first of all, you wouldn't feel that your enemy, that you won. You should feel that the Torah won, not that my enemy lost and I won. But besides that, you would can't feel that there's no such thing as an enemy here. There's no such thing as another side. Lamai say you were right. The halach lamai. But the other one is also true. But yes, as in sein simcha that has been vecha. But since in your simcha you feel that it's your enemy you fell, is a simen as in them is a reingemischt a hergish from the dan notzach. Shows that you really feel that you won, not because the Torah won and the truth won. I won. The dan notzach meitin. I won over the second guy. The Farzok Shmuel Hakotten. So who says this lesson? Shmuel Hakotten. Why was he called Shmuel Hakotten? Was as a gerufen of Vishumaktim in Satz. Gemara says that he was a big honor. He was a mamish completely bittel. That's why Shmuel called Shmuel Hakotten. So Shmuel Hakotten says, as limud Torah muzayim mit abittel. When you learn Torah, which is the second thing, while you're learning, you have to be bottled. So much so that you will not be happy. In other words, you will not feel that there is a nevecho and you won and he lost, etc., etc. It is not negated to the games from Emes from Torah. You only care about Torah. That's what he says. So that's the second thing that we're saying, that while you're learning, you should also have the bittul. And that's what Shmuel HaKotten says. So the first Mishnah that he quoted, which is actually the second Mishnah, but the first Mishnah that I ever quoted is to tell you that you have to learn Torah like a yelad, not like a zokin, not with bittul, not like a with chokhmah. You have to understand it, but it should not be based only on your chokhmah. And the second thing is, you have to have a proper bittul and not feel b'chal that your metzias is involved while you're learning. It's kind of chavar zayin taina, but you could have come with a taina like this. Emes tak azayif the day from eivecha. Ken zayin was galten sa divrei kim chayim. Taka true. The other guy's opinion is also true. So therefore, whatever he said is also an inyan of Torah. That guy wanted to bring his opinion lemaisa, not only in halach in Eilev Chaim in Chochmeh, but in Maise. And in them macht doch atos, and in that he made a mistake. Says befeirish nit azay. We figured out it's not like that. The mail is doch an from bin feiler. How do we say that it's not something he fell? Yes, he did fall. Eilev Chaim is true in one level, but lemaisa he lost. So the fail. What did we say before that? If you really care about the opinion, then you wouldn't feel it has been fail. This has been fail. Einfach, was soll man bei ihm machen, soll bei sich fehl sein, der Minion von Altisma, why don't be happy when he fell. Und noch mehr, soll es nicht marke sein als ein Fehler weg, not only he shouldn't be happy, he shouldn't even feel that he fell. Hat doch fortbewattelt, wenn Linie built ja mit. By me winning, I was mevatel, something that's not true. Und das darf ja rufen Simcha, to make you happy. Why does he say don't be happy? If then Shmuel HaKotten mamshich, so Shmuel HaKotten continues, and he says, the second part of the posse, but he brings it to Gabat Torah. And Yira Hashem might see this, but Abeinov, it'll be bad in his eyes, Veheshiv Olov Ape, and the Eibishter will take away his anger from him, which means like this. Es ken sein, ados was der Chaverot nit mechaben gewen la loche, could be the reason why the friend of yours, the other person, did not mechaben to the halacha, is es nit mitzad hachasorn is ein seichel geht. It's not because his seichel wasn't true. Not because something lacking in his seichel. But al tzamneinish. You have to be punished for something. Mitzad api shel mailo is an itzeicha to mechaben zayin halacha sometime because David is angry on him for some whatever reason, and it's a punishment that he can't be mechaben halacha, but not because there is something wrong in his understanding. You can't be happy that you fell. Von dem was es ist durchgeführt geworden und durch ihn an Einisch, because Peil, he lost. And could be that's an Einisch. So you'll be happy that he was punished. Von dem was ist durchgeführt geworden und durch ihn an Einisch von Eibischen auf jenem. How could you be happy that the Eibischter made the punishment of this person? That's what he said. The Lashon of the Pasuk is, Pen Yirash V'Rabeinov, Vaeschanan Melech Apei. Hashem will take away the anger on him, but the reason is because of Hashem's anger. The simcha darf sein nor from them was is nisbar given the halacha lemetosa. Only you have to be happy that now this halacha came out, but the fact that he missed out, don't be happy about it, because it could be probably the reason because Hashem didn't want him to win. So it's a punishment. You should be happy that he was punished. Adarabbe, ei by him bet sein simcha bin feilim vechol. He continues, if by him, by you will be happy that he fell, that he lost. He's recht, it's possible. The mitvet der Gerim sein der Beheshig may all of Ape, you will cause that the anger that the Eibishter had on him, which caused him to lose, will be turned on you. The Eibishter bet Kivyochel opken Ape for sein Chaver of him. Possible that that's an unfortunate time to Bechlal. The Eibishter will take the anger on him and put it on you. That you might next time lose. Don't be happy. Don't be this smart aleck thinking that you're happy and you're not greater than him. And by him it was a punishment, fine, that's between him and Davish, nothing to do with you. And if you don't look at that way, you never know, Davish could say, you felt that way, will bring the Einish on you. Und der Mareintrachten sich and thereby thinking all about this, meditating, contemplating on all this, that der Peilen bei sich, person will fail on himself, as nicht nur wird bei ihm nicht sein, can simcha bin feile weg, not only he will not be happy when the enemy hates the other person falls, nor aderabbe. Contrary, by ihm wird mekuyem werden der Heper davon. What will happen is there'll be the opposite. As in one place the Gemara says you could have two Talmidei Chacham arguing, and it's almost like they become enemies. The Gemara says the end is einam zozim misham. They don't move, they don't leave. Achenasin eyavim zelas, they become friends. Nochmer, not only they become friends. K'maimer Chazal by B'silum B'Shamai, that the Gemara says when they gave B'silum B'Shamai, chiba v'reus niagin zeh b'zeh. They would love and friendship. They behave to each other. The Kayim Hashanema, they fulfill the pasuk. It says, "Ha'emes v'hasholem ahevu," the truth and the sholem they love. So the ikers don't be happy, and not only that, is if you feel that you need just the emes of Torah, it'll make you that you will become his best friend. But the Vaila, we see the connection between this parsha and Pirkei Avos, these two mishnayos, and what we said before on the parsha. On the parsha, we said that in the parsha we learn by the mitzvah Talmud Torah the two levels of bittul. Types of two times of bittul, before you learn and while you learn. So here we have the two mishnayos, which also the first one that said that you should learn Torah yella. That means you have to learn Torah like a child learned. The approach, the mindset of learning Torah has to be with bittul. And the second one is that you have to have bittul while you're learning, and that's hinted in what Shmuel HaKohen said according to the pshat of the Matzah. Okay. So till next time, Yirtzeh Hashem.
Koyach. That's a koyach. It was hard to explain.